Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for Lewis Hamilton in Formula One, or the birth of a historical rebirth within Ferrari? After his statements in Hungary, the paddock arde. But what really is behind his words? Everything changed in a matter of hours. Hungary 2025 will be remembered not by an epic maneuver, or for an unexpected victory, but for the emotional collapse of one of the greatest icons in the history of motor racing. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, lived one of the hardest weekends of his entire career, and not for an accident or for a controversial sanction, but for something much deeper, the momentary loss of self-confidence. The qualifying session was the first blow. In an SF25 that had proven to be competitive with Charles Leclerc reaching the pole position, Hamilton failed to get out of Q2. His time left him in the 12th position, more than half a second of his partner with a practically identical car. What came later was unexpected, brutal, raw. During the post-classification interview, Hamilton broke. He looked at the camera and bluntly pronounced a phrase that froze the paddock's blood and millions of fans around the world. "I am absolutely useless, they probably need to change pilot." Words that nobody expected to hear from a pilot of his caliber. In the race, things were even worse. He came out from an awkward position, lost rhythm easily and never managed to connect with the car. It ended in the same position in which it started, 12th, 0 points, no impact. And then, in the mixed area before the question about his words of the previous day, he dropped another bomb. When you have a feeling, you have a feeling, and there are many things happening in the background that are not great. With that phrase, the first to shoot was Bernie Ecclestone. The former head of Formula One, a man who for decades handled the sport threads with an iron hand, did not hesitate to launch his definitive tone diagnosis. Lewis is tired. He has been doing the same during an eternity. He should have retired a long time ago. For someone who, for years, was defender of the show and the big names, those words have an unquestionable media weight. But what many do not say is that Ecclestone represents a generation that never accepted at all what Hamilton symbolizes. A pilot who not only won titles but transformed the sport from within: visibility, diversity, social impact. For Bernie, the F1 belongs to a classic mold. And Hamilton, from his eruption, broke that mold. That is why their statements are not simply sports opinions. They are part of a narrative that seeks to close the British cycle before he decides to do it. And that is where Hamilton needs to demonstrate not only talent on the track, but strength outside it. You have to reconquer speech, recover narrative control, mark the agenda, not react to it. He demonstrated it in China, when in just his second weekend with Ferrari hit the table in classification, returning to the front, recovering the smile and, above all, the trust. That was his message to Ecclestone, to the press and who had already buried him. "I'm still here. And I have not finished." If Lewis Hamilton's future in Ferrari is really at stake, as his own testimony suggests, then we are not talking only about a pilot change. We are talking about a seismic movement capable of altering the entire ecosystem of Formula One. Because Hamilton is not another corridor. It is a symbol, a brand, a living narrative inside the sport. And its continuity or its absence has consequences that go far beyond Maranello. For Ferrari, direct involvement is devastating. His 2025 project was designed with Hamilton as a cornerstone. It was not just adding a pilot with 7 titles, it was about incorporating someone capable of leading on and off track, transferring experience, pushing the team beyond their comfort zone. They bet on a structural, emotional and technical change. A Leclerc-Hamilton duo not only promised performance, promised hierarchy. Removing that piece of the board would imply returning to instability that Ferrari has been trying to eradicate years. Moreover, Hamilton's exit without having completed his first cycle in Ferrari would send a devastating message to any pilot or elite engineer, that the Scuderia is not an environment prepared to manage external talent. That, despite partial results, its structure remains resistant to real change. And that, at a time where 2025 decisions will directly impact the regulation era of 2026, is dangerous. And there is an additional element: the impact on fans and the global image of sport. Hamilton is an intergenerational icon. Its presence not only drags faithful audiences for more than a decade, but also opens the sport to new generations, to non-traditional public, to expanding markets. His retirement, especially in such dark or ambiguous circumstances, would be a loss of symbolic capital for the entire F1. The sport cannot be allowed that its most recognized figure will march through the rear door, defeated by the system instead of retired in its own terms. In short, if Hamilton decides to close this chapter, it will not be a simple change of alignment. It will be a complete reconfiguration of the balance of power within F1. Ferrari would be in a fragile position. The dominant narrative of the championship would change, and the pilot market would enter an early storage. It would be the type of movement that not only marks a season, but redefines an entire era. The moment Lewis Hamilton said, "I hope to return," he wasn't closing a door. I was leaving an open slot. A pause loaded with meaning, doubts, humanity. And precisely there lies the greatness of this moment. Because for someone who has won everything, who has seen the top more than once, publicly recognizing that he is going through a dark tunnel is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that it still cares, that the flame is still on. Retirement is a real option. That is undeniable, but not necessarily imminent. What is happening with Hamilton is an internal conflict, not a terminal exhaustion. It is the collision between expectation and reality, between what he visualized when he signed with Ferrari and what he is finding. But if something has demonstrated throughout his career, he is not defined by blows, but for his response capacity. The history of Formula One is full of champions that, after moments of crisis, found a second air. Schumacher returned with Mercedes after his glorious stage with Ferrari. Alonso, criticized for years, returned stronger than ever with Aston Martin. Even Sebastian Vettel, before his definitive withdrawal, lived a stage of emotional redemption. Why not Hamilton? The elements are on the table. The SF25 is speed. It is not a dominant car, but it has proven to be competitive. Charles Leclerc has won poles. The performance is there. What is missing is cohesion. And that, unlike pure talent, can be built. Hamilton needs time. You need a technical structure at your service. A team that understands his way of working, his needs as setup, his language with the car. And that is not built in 2 races. Not even 5. It requires continuity, patience, and, above all, conviction. The most interesting thing is that we have already seen signs of what can happen if everything fits. In China, just a week after disaster in Australia, Hamilton reappeared in attack mode. It was placed on the tip during the classification to the sprint, fought side by side with Verstappen, and recovered something much more valuable than the points: trust. It was him again. Not only in speed but in attitude, in body language, in that brightness in the eyes that only appears when the pilot feels that he is in control. And that is what defines the path to the Renaissance. It's not about winning the next race. It is about reuniting with the process. To reconnect with the pleasure of driving, with the challenge of adjusting every millimeter of the car to make it its own. Hamilton is not chasing an 8th title by necessity. He is doing it because he believes he can still write history. Because his legacy, although he is already insured, deserves an end at the height of his career. Ferrari, meanwhile, has a unique opportunity. If you decide to support it, if the team structures to enhance your strengths, you can benefit from the same phenomenon that Mercedes lived for a decade: the creation of a winning culture. With Hamilton as axis, Ferrari can learn to think in terms of long-term stability, of sustained evolution. Because beyond the victories, Lewis has always been a constructor of successful environments. Right now, the board is open. The path to retirement is tempting. Easy. An elegant exit that many would consider understandable. But there is also the other way. To resist, rebuild, and attack again. A longer, more difficult, but also infinitely more satisfying path. And the final decision will not be taken by the press, nor the former leaders, nor the analysts. You will take it. In silence. Far from microphones. And when I do, it will be as everything has done in his career. With intention, with purpose, and with the firm desire to leave a mark that transcends the track. And now it's your turn. After everything we have explored together in this video, the question is not just what will happen to Hamilton, but what do you think should happen? Are we facing the last chapters of one of the most glorious races of modern motoring? Or do you think we are still in time to witness an epic resurrection in the style of the great champions? Should Ferrari restructure completely to build a tailored environment for Hamilton? Or simply accept that it was a failed bet and look to the future with a new generation of pilots? I want to know what you think, but not with quick answers. I want to read your arguments, your theories, your doubts. This issue deserves a serious conversation between true sport fans. So go down to comments and tell me, renounce or redemption, legacy or where? What would you do if you were in Lewis's position? And if you are interested in more thoroughly how these tensions are built in modern F1, what is behind technical decisions, market movements, and psychological strategies of the equipment, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now, activate the bell, and make sure to be here every week, because in this channel we go far beyond the simple race result. Here we unravel the most complex human and political layers of Formula One.